Welcome to the Leadership Expose podcast. This podcast is for purpose-driven leaders at diverse levels and organizations around the world who are seeking to scale and transform their leadership, to level up their business, and to create an impact on the lives of people all around them. Business and boardroom topics, trends, innovation, transformation, and the intersection with leadership is the focus. We enable success. I'm your host, Stephen Paul. In this episode, I'm delighted to have with me Peter Serenita. He is a senior data management executive and advisor with extensive experience leading global organizations in the financial services industry. He has held senior executive leadership roles and as Group Chief Data Officer of a global bank, and in pioneering that capability by establishing a global enterprise data management ecosystem. Peter is also the chairman of the board of directors of the Enterprise Data Management Council and voted 2009 Reference Data Executive and Data and Analytics Executive of the Year 2021 by multiple publications. He's an author and speaker, and we'll hear about Peter and the role of data and how that is shaping the future of organizations. Peter, welcome. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Stephen, and thanks for having me. It's having a really good day. It's been a terrific summer.
Wonderful. Is that sunny New York?
Yeah, I mean, I actually, for those of you who may not know, I actually retired July 1st, and that time was intentional. I wanted to spend quality time with the family, have a couple of grandkids, and so the summer was a great time to do that. So it's been a fantastic summer. So now turn my attention to the fall and winter and figuring out what next.
Awesome. We're going to delve a little bit more into your retirement
Okay.
and how you're planning to do that. But keen to hear about your journey, Peter. Where did it all begin? Briefly tell us.
Yeah.
Between personal and professional journey.
It's one of those stories that people always think about having a very clear path in their career, their progression, but I think more of the time it's more happenstance than plan. Yeah. It also has to do with timing. It has to do with the environment. Again, going back to I can't even remember the years, like early 2000, maybe even late 1990s. For those of you on the phone, or I should say on the video, way back then. Data wasn't a thing. It wasn't a separate thing. It was just part of the environment. Mm-hmm. And so at JP Morgan, I took on a role. Actually, I created a data organization. Again, we didn't call it a data organization at the time, but it was to service the wholesale bank for its customer data, its SecMaster, its calendaring, its settlement instructions and stuff like that. So, and that was the first time we pulled that all together and we started managing that as discrete capabilities for the whole firm. I think that's what set me on my journey to be a data professional. Yeah. Like I said, it's not to any kind of master plan. It was like, oh, there's a need, let's fill it.
Yeah, amazing. And with that mindset and building of those capabilities, you transitioned very well into other organizations as well, building capabilities for organizations that both you and I worked for as well.
Yes, absolutely. So back then it was really more, I had both tech and ops reporting to me. So it was really more about getting the processes and the technology aligned across the different businesses within JP Morgan, whether I was in the investment bank, it was the private bank, it was the commercial bank. Again, those were old organizational names. We did, like I said, in the industry, there was no data management practice per se. There was no process. So, fast forward a little bit, I moved into Worldwide Security Services in JP Morgan and became a chief data officer. And that was a new title. It was actually the second named chief data officer in financial services. Yeah. It was really then trying to figure out, what does this all mean? And what is, and we wouldn't be able to use the term a data professional at that time because there was no profession, right? There was no process, there were no tools. So we had to figure it out myself. And now the first chief data officer, was John Bottega, and John and I worked very closely together because we together were trying to kind of figure out how do we do this thing that we call data management. And yeah, and to your point, I took it to a certain point at JP Morgan, and then I was asked to join HSBC, where we met.
Yeah.
And that was more intentional, right? They hired me. They said, initially I was in the Global Banking Markets, it was called, but then ultimately in a few years, they said, I really want you to lead a data organization, build a data organization within HSBC. And so now I had to kind of figure out, okay, how do I do that? What does it mean to be a global data organization? And it goes across all of the different, dimensions. What are the people? It always starts with the people. What are the types of people we need? What's the organizational structure going to look like? What's the technology? What's our relationship to technology and the business? How do you do it on a global basis versus a local basis? So it was quite a daunting task, but I'm very fulfilled. It was amazing, and I'm very proud of where we were able to take that, and then hand it off to the next CDO there.
Yeah, no, amazing. And then you kind of moved on, and
yeah, with HSBC there was a lot of travel. I was based in New York, and HSBC is headquartered in London, so I spent a lot of time in London and other countries, and that was, again, I loved that. It was very rewarding, but it gets to a point where I want a little more stability of being home more. So I worked with my boss at the time to transition to a new hire we had hired. And then I took a role at Scotia Bank as their chief data officer, initially in the US. Again, that was the intent to stay local. And then within a year or two, they asked me to be the global CDO as well. And they'd already started building a global organization. So I kind of went into that role to kind of take that to the next level. But the other thing we did at Scotia Bank, which I really convinced me that this is the next role for me. Was we moved away. Well, we didn't move away. Excuse me. Let me correct myself. I was about to say we moved away from defense, but that would be inaccurate. We incorporated the offense into our defense strategy. So we had a better balance between offense and defense. And the way they did that was they basically changed the entire organization. And what they did is they combined the analytics organization and the data organization into a single organization and had it reporting into the business. And so now it became a business imperative. And obviously the analytics people were wholly focused on business enablement, customer experience. The data people had both responsibilities of enabling that customer experience and business enablement, as well as the traditional regulatory. And so we had to change our processes and the way we worked to better fit this duplicity of, if you think about the requirements of a analytics team versus a regulatory team, they're complete opposites. Right. The regulatory team, it's all about 100% accuracy and time. You have time to implement those things. So you see these multi-year projects of regulatory compliance and everything like that. But on the other side, on the analytics side, it's completely opposite, right? It's really about speed to market. Accuracy is secondary. Something that's 80% accurate is good enough statistically for the analytic to work. So how do you marry those things so you're able to satisfy both masters, if you will? Was a challenge, and and it really was, again, writing a new playbook, basically.
And what I'm hearing is exactly that. I mean, you wrote the playbook, you architected the whole, with your leadership, architected the whole thing. And it's quite interesting, as you were describing, JP Morgan, HSBC, Scotia Bank. These are large organizations, and you correctly mentioned about the awareness of data and, decades ago to what it is now. And it's not just about data, as you were describing. There is a people component, there's a cultural component, and all of that just came into fruition as you progress through the different organizations. But I'm curious, Peter, with all these changes and new organization and bringing your new vision into these organizations around the data ecosystem, I'm calling it very broadly. what kind of challenges were you facing in some of these organizations that holistically?
Yeah, yeah, no, good, excellent question. I think this is all about transformation, transforming companies or processes or technology, all of the and people, culture. So like any transformation program, it has to be thought out in terms of things don't change quickly in corporate environments, right? It can't, it just can't, unless it's a very small company, right? It does not change on a dime. So how do you affect change of a very large organization in a way that's not, I was about to say not disruptive. It's not a question of disruption. How do you do it in an orchestrated way that it actually does evolve? Yeah. And you get the integration, the support. And so it does have to be well planned. Yeah. But also, as you might imagine, it has to do a lot to do with interpersonal skills. So it's the soft skills as well. How do you influence people? And it's not about reporting lines when you get to that type of scale, right? It's about relationship management. It's about a vision and getting people to that vision and getting them excited about it. And I think that's one of the things, and we can catch up on that a little bit later, talk a little more about that a little bit later, is like, how do you get energized, and how do you get all of these very diverse and cross-functional teams all rowing in the same direction. Yeah. And that's about, again, getting people on board with that vision and making them part of that team, not feel part of that team, but actually be a part of that team, part of that momentum. And they're all excited about it. Quite frankly, these organizational charts are an inhibitor to change, yeah, right?
True, true.
And don't get me wrong. I mean, everyone has their own agenda and priority, not because they have a personal agenda or a priority, but their line of command, if you will, has priorities that are set for them. And then you're coming over that and saying, well, wait a second, there's something that's bigger for the enterprise. And it's always this give and take between the business line and the enterprise. Yeah. And I do have to be a little careful with that word, because I don't want to imply that everything is centralized. That's not the case. In fact, that's probably one of the questions of what's the worst model, or we can talk a little bit more about models later. Yeah. But how do you affect change across an enterprise? But as you know, change happens in the trenches. It doesn't happen at that level. So how do you manage that?
Yeah, yeah, and we definitely will be speaking about that, and getting that buy-in. And you mentioned about that influencing side of things, and the types of conversations that you have, especially when you're making wholesale change, i.e. transformation, is a whole new type of conversation with diverse levels, right? And how that happens. But before we actually come into that one here, we talk about data, and we talk about data as a whole. One question, just for different types of leaders and organizations, different sizes of organizations, different sectors. Why is data important? And I know you touched on some of these things around the what has changed over the decades, but just keen to just hear your views as to why data is important and what has changed over the decades.
Yeah. Well, let me start by saying, and for anyone listening here, this is an amazing time to be a data person. I mean, I couldn't be more pleased with where data has come to, and where it's going, what the future holds for data folks and data people. And I use the word data people, meaning, anyone associated with data, because at the end of the day, everyone's going to be associated with data. Yeah. But let me go back to your question, right? And this I do hit on some of this. So what I've been working on a little bit over the last few months, I'm working on co-authoring a couple of white papers, a series of white papers. And I'm co-authoring them with Elia Polanco and Julia Mesa. And the first white paper talks about the business transformation, moving to become a data-driven organization. Why is that important, and what does it mean, and stuff like that. The second one talks about, the technology transformation that has to accompany that. And the third one talks about, how does data management has to evolve, because again, it's not, data management, like all things, needs to evolve to keep up with these change. It can't just stay back to the same data management that was. it needs to, it needs to continue to integrate and be, and actually, and to some degree, be more integrated. But anyway, going back to your question, when you think back, so again, this is a little bit of this is in the first white paper, which hopefully will be out next month. It should be out next month in October. The past, we, meaning financial services, were very focused on process, right? We had to book the trade, we had to confirm the trade. Obviously I'm using a wholesale example, but the same thing with retail, right? We had to take the deposit, we had to update the balances, right? And so there was a whole process. And what we did is the main focus was optimizing that process, right? And then when we optimized that process, and part of that was through process, part of that was through technology, right? So all your systems were built around process, okay? And so then what happened is we said, okay, we've got those processes pretty well in control. We can pretty much, you do a deposit, you're pretty confident, that balance is going to be updated, your funds will be available. But then we said, listen, we want to provide our customers with more than individual products. We want to provide them with multiple products, especially global companies, right? So now we had to say, okay, how do we optimize that process across the business silos that exist? And that became a bit of a challenge, right? Because it wasn't built that way. It was built, much more around individual processes. So systems then had to adjust, the processes adjusted, systems had to adjust. And the way we adjusted those processes and systems, well, we said, okay, we need to send data to each of those processes. And so if I, wanted to look across, I would send data from here, from there, consolidate it, and present it, right? And so, but it was still kind of, focused on the process. It was still process driven, the data, and process was king. The phrase we're using is the data was brought to the process, okay? Now, if you kind of think about it, call it an evolution or maybe even a revolution, to move to a data-driven organization, actually data is king, not the process. True. Processes are temporal. They come, they go, they finish, they stop, right? Whereas data is perpetual. So we've got it kind of backwards. So what we want to do now is we want to say, listen, the data is the center of the universe, and processes will act on that data. And that means that we've got to kind of invert the way we think. Our technology needs to, again, evolve to a different data architecture or a different technical architecture. And again, our data management processes, our businesses, all that needs to transform. So really, this is what I think is, what it really truly means to be a data-driven organization is really data is king. And the reason it has become even, and so I'm finally going to answer your question. The reason why is, like I said earlier, the processes are pretty well controlled, but it's that more holistic capability that you really can't achieve without focusing on the data before the process. And that's what most companies are. And you see that, you see that in newer companies, right? Newer companies that are a little more agile, data is king. And I know everyone uses the same examples, and I won't even bother trying to mention them but this is what a lot of financial firms are really spending a lot of time and energy trying to get to. And it's a journey. It's not a, okay, we've decided we're going to be a data organization, data is going to be first. So in that second model, right, earlier I said the data is, goes to the function. Now the function goes to the data. Okay. So it really inverts everything.
And as you were just describing, and first of all, congratulations on the paper that you're co-authoring, and we're definitely looking forward to seeing it when it comes through. But as you were just describing there, I was also thinking that without data, because data is so key, right? So without that data, the companies are unable to perform per their vision, because of, let's say, inaccurate forecasting or their revenue goals or anything of that sort. And also now we've got these big changes, albeit things that have been happening over the last decade, such as sustainability and ESG and so forth. We talk about ESG reporting and, depending on, the size of the organization and so forth. All of that is because of data. And
Yeah.
and you mentioned about transformation and technology, and then there is all this next gen technology that needs to enable all of this, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So,
Yeah.
I want to go backwards a little bit because I don't think one thing I left out of the previous question, you know, why is data important, right? And I obviously gave a very long-winded and probably not the concise answer. So let me try and get a little more concise on that, and then go to your other point about this next generation of technology, because that's really exciting as well, right?
Yeah.
So, in the past, we would know our customers through the interactions we had with them, right? And again, using a retail bank example, the person would come into the branch, they know the teller, they know the bank manager, they chat and they see, what do you want? What do you need? How's the family? And that sort of thing. And then, now we move to a digitized environment,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden that personal interaction and the nuggets of information that would create are gone. Right. And so now the way we know people is through their actions, through things they do, things they look at, things they ask about. And so now we're collecting information to know our customers through electronic means.
Yeah.
And even if it was an interactive session, a lot of that is also created into data as well. So, and now we have the opportunity to know even more about our customer than we ever could or would. Right. And that all in the interest of servicing that customer, again, because we can do a whole other podcast about the use of data ethics and stuff like that, and it's a hugely important topic, but again, we wouldn't have time for that here. So I'm going to just say that, so data became important because it was knowledge. It's the only knowledge, corporate knowledge that exists, customer knowledge that exists. And so now, how do you leverage that knowledge? And to your point, now we have a new generation of tools, which is really, really exciting, right? And in fact, the second paper talks a lot about the new generation of tools and why we think now is the time to be able to become a data-driven organization. The sophistication of some of these tools, the machine learning capabilities, not just in the analytics part of the process, but actually in the data knowledge part of the process, the data acquisition part of the process, the data management part of the process. So this is why I'm really excited about where data is and where it's heading. The capabilities, again, going way back with John and I, we're trying to figure out, so what do you think, can we use this tool to try and do this little thing? Now it's like there are, I won't say a proliferate in the sense of there are too many, but there's certainly a number of fantastic tools out there, and more on the horizon, that will let you, A, manage your data, and B, access your data very, very quickly and very easily, in a way that I'm going to use another term, data for all, right?
Good.
And that becomes a little controversial too. It's like, oh, the first thing you hear is, okay, wait a second, data privacy or privacy from where you are, data security, and all that though is built in. It's not like we've ignored it and said, okay, everybody gets access to data. No, all that's built in. So data for all, and then a little asterisk that says, assuming you have, the appropriate controls and but that's usually exciting.
Yeah. So just pivoting from that, data is definitely important. It's key. And you've pioneered, you've established that. Now there are other companies out there from an awareness and bringing that conscious awareness amongst board members or owners, founders, CEOs, board members. How do you get this on the agenda of the executive committee and the board?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. That's it's easy said, harder done, right? It really does require champions. You have to have champions in the organization. It can't be you can't be a lone wolf or a voice in in the wilderness saying hey. So I think there's a combination of events. I don't think it's any one thing, right? I think there are some organizations that the CEO and the board are, in fact, they're driving it. They're like very aware. They're like, hey, this is what we want. And so, those of you who are in companies like that, fantastic, just full steam ahead. And other companies that are what I'll call more traditional companies or more traditional businesses, that this is kind of new and scary, because there's a lot of, let's give a little bit of credit to, more than a little bit of credit to the board and to the CEOs out there, right? There's a lot they have to think about, right? Yeah. It's not like they're sitting there waiting to think about data-driven organizations and stuff like that. They're worrying about the environment, especially more recently, with all the different events happening. There's a lot on their shoulders to worry about, and whether it be their capital, their customers, their business mix, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And again, I'm not pretending to be a CEO, but so really it requires, again, more than one person saying this is important.
Yeah.
And it requires people, and when I say people, more effectively, if you had business leaders in the organization saying this is important, as opposed to data people per se. Again, I don't, because that's what it's all about. It's about the business. Yeah. The second thing is, and this is going to sound counter a little bit, is I'll say it's FOMO, fear of missing out.
Yeah.
Right. True. If we start to see organizations that are doing that transformation and having some success, that will cause some of the leaders to say, hey, wait a second, and it's a real threat. I really, and in the paper, I actually talk about it. I say, if you don't transform to this, you will be left behind. I truly believe that companies that did not become data-driven will be obsolete, be bought, be obsolete. They will be the laggers. Yeah. So it's not a fake FOMO, it's a real FOMO.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we are in this exponential age where change is happening so rapidly, and data being a big factor. I mean, I'm in conversations with several leaders as well, and any conversation that I'm having with, or any if an organization is trying to make a change, data is part of it. You just cannot get away from it. But it's also doing it the right way, and it takes time, as you were describing. Right. You need champions, and you need all these different business partners and so forth to come forward and bring that single voice. And the larger the size of the organization, the
more difficult it is. Absolutely. Yeah. And and the older, I'm gonna say, in some degree, the older the organization, meaning it's more embedded, the processes are more embedded, and so anytime you have that, transformations are a little more difficult. In fact, originally we were planning to write 3 white papers in the series, and now we've decided, after having written the 3, or having drafts of the 3, we decided that we do need a 4th one, which is how do you transition to a data-driven organization? We have a little blurt part of that. We had planned to put that in the 2nd white paper, but we decided that it didn't really do it justice. So we're going to actually create a 4th white paper in the series to talk about, okay, now how do you start? How do you get going? Because it can't be big bang, right? And it is going to take time. But how do you live in this environment that's kind of, hybrid, right? Yeah. Because you're going to be both moving toward, but still in, the old model. So it's an interesting challenge, but again, I still firmly believe that it's a must. It's no longer an option. It used to be those companies that wanted to do really well, really leverage data. Well, in the future, it's going to be non-negotiable. It's a must to survive.
Yeah. Peter, you're a leader in your own right, and you've touched on so many of these aspects here. But is there one thing that you'd like to share that's your secret formula to your success?
Well, I guess, I guess what I would say is, at the end of the day, it's about people. Okay. And again, we talked a little bit before about the new technologies and all that, and that's really important, but it's about people. How do you get an organization to work towards a goal? How do you get an organization to basically coalesce around an objective and fund? Because we could spend another hour talking about funding, because that's always a difficult thing, given again how much gets put on the plate of change the bank, if you will. But it is about building those relationships, building that vision, getting people to coalesce around that vision, getting the support to drive it. And then the hardest part by far is sustaining that over a period of time,
Yeah.
right? There's always the best of intentions when these things start off. And
Yeah.
I'm not just talking about data transformation, any transformation, right? There's always the best of intent, but over time, things happen. And how do you keep that momentum? How do you keep that, on the trajectory? It will never be the straight line that people would want it to be, because life doesn't work that way. But
Yeah.
how do you make sure that you've made all the course corrections, but still have the forward momentum and showing results, right? And again, this is not anything anyone doesn't know. It's not a big bang approach that all the golden pot of gold is at the end of the rainbow. There are little caches of gold along the way.
Yeah. Yeah. It's making those transformational changes through all those different interventions, or setting that conducive environment, as you had.
Yeah, and if I can interrupt you a second, that's one of the things that, advice to data people, right? And again, this is things they probably already know, but it's worth saying, is, have a business mindset, right? Because, and again, especially at the early days, I think it's gotten better over time, but in the early days, it was about data purity, it was about data, data people, that's what they were trained in, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that didn't really resonate, and could never resonate with the business people per se. So really think about it in their terms. What is the business value of what you're doing? What are the business outcomes? It all has to be about outcomes. And it's not just, again, the outcome at the end. Each step, what are the outcomes that we're going to realize along the way? And really talk and think in those terms. It will help you prioritize the work,
Yeah.
right? As well as, again, connect to the business and customers.
Yeah. Peter, you mentioned you're retired, but what does a day in the life of Peter look like these days?
Yeah, I made a conscious decision to retire before the summer, because I really wanted to spend the summer, like take the summer off, basically, which is what I did. I spent a lot of time with my grandkids and with my wife, and at our beach house and stuff like that. So it was really very rewarding. And I figured in the fall I'd figure out what I do on a go forward basis. And I'm kind of leaning towards doing things like and you had mentioned this a little while ago, kind of advisory work or board work. Really looking at some key board positions, doing some advisory work, and really helping. I really want to do it. As you can tell, I have a passion about this. So it's really about not completely disconnecting, but taking the experiences I've had over these so many years, and hopefully being able to impart and to continue to learn. My views have shifted over the years, and they, thank goodness, they'd be obsolete views and out of touch.
Yeah.
So that's why, it's constantly learning, adjusting, advising, guiding. That's the kind of things I enjoy doing. So I'd really like to take some of my experience and really help others with along the journey.
Yeah, and they definitely will benefit from the advice and knowledge and the wisdom that you will bring to the table. Peter, we're coming to a close very shortly. Any final closing messages or a challenge to other executive leaders, boards, or business organizations that you want to highlight or state here?
Yeah, I guess, first of all, address to again, and I kind of talked a little bit about it. I'm usually excited about, where data is headed, from the back room of, a small group of people to it being, and you can see it, it being a profession, number one. And I'm usually excited about the fact that it's a profession. As you know, I'm still, as you mentioned earlier, I'm the chairman of the Enterprise Data Management Council. In the past, I was on the advisory board of Stevens Institute of Technology's Data Business and Information and Analytics program. So I'm usually passionate about, building the next generation, or should I say working with the next generation of data people. Yeah. Because again, it's so enriching to me personally, because besides hopefully I can impart something on them, but actually what they also impart on me is a new way of thinking. Yeah. Right? The new generations of people, of individuals, have different ways of thinking, which I've said this in some conferences way back when I would speak. I'd say, well, I can take data incrementally or linear, up the scale of capabilities, but the real big leaps will happen when different types of thinking take it. And that's when generational thinking happens. And it's like, oh, well, what about this? And then boom, we take a leap there. And like I said, I think we're starting to see that in the technology arena, because I think the new generation of tool sets are a function of that, which really excites me. So as number one, it's a great time to be a data person. And also take a view, right? Have a vision, take a chance. And that will be rewarding, not just for yourself, but for the organizations that you're in. Going to the job and doing the job because you were asked to do the job is, I'd say maybe somewhat rewarding, but even more rewarding is being a thought leader, being a visionary. Again, it has to be practical and executable and executed, right? I don't want, theoretical, whatever. So, but help us take data forward in a practical way. To business leaders, really look at data as a part of your, I'm about to say a part of your business, but let's start there. Data is an important component of your business. It's just as important as any other component of your business. One of the things that it will be able to provide you is not just information and knowledge, but it actually can, and this is where you make that turn, and we're a little ways away from here, it can be your business, right? It can it can be one of the primary drivers of your business, not just an enabler of your business, right? So really so does it have the right place in your organization? I don't mean like organizational structure. Does it have the right voice? Are you considering it as part of what you worry about, what you're concerned about? A lot of people in the past would say, where does a CDO sit? And that was a heavy focus, as you know, for many years, right? CDOs, they report into the technology group, or they report into the business, right? And it's somewhat important. What's really important is who's actually heading it, number one, right? And then they would say, well, we want data report to the CEO. And I pause a little bit with that, because I said earlier, the CEO has a lot to think about. And I don't know I think the next port of call for the data organization, or the CDO, if you will, is actually the head of business strategy. If you truly believe that data should drive the strategy or be a major portion of that strategy, then why isn't the head of business strategy have responsibility for the data strategy? So that's my take. And so that's what I would say to the business leaders is, be very cognizant of your data capabilities. Is it what you need it to be? And are you organized in a way for success?
Peter, wise words from Peter, and a challenge to businesses, to individuals, and to leaders as well. Peter, thank you very much for being with us today and sharing your journey and your insights, your wisdom, and your forward-thinking vision of data and the organization behind that. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. It's been fantastic talking to you.
Okay, folks, thank you very much for listening in, and stay tuned for our next episode, where we hear from the CEO and chair of FTSE 500 oil and gas company and how he's transforming the industry. Stay tuned for that in our next episode. Hey, I hope you enjoy the podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. You're now seeing this part of the video also because you consume some of my content, insights, and teachings. Maybe you've been to my LinkedIn page or website, or seen other social media ads, or listened to my podcast. I'm Stephen Paul, a business and transformational executive coach, strategic advisor, leader, and board member. I've been in diverse roles: corporate executive, entrepreneur, and worked with businesses and firms of all sizes, built and launched businesses, created high-impact boards, and so forth in 4 continents. I get it. I've been there, done that. But what is different is I bring a unique perspective and a playbook. I've helped 100+ business leaders just like you to scale and align their leadership, top teams, the board, and overall business for growth. Leaders like Ivana from medium-sized company in the EU who grew 150% and expanded globally in under 5 months. After she started to work with me over facilitated sessions in an initial 3 days, I helped fine-tune their strategy, and align their leadership team and board to be a cohesive driving force to achieve their dreams and outcomes. I want to teach you the same thing and more on how to scale and align your leadership team and board so you can increase your business growth and value. Get clarity on what is the next right strategy for you. There are multiple ways we can work with you. Number one, click the link for a free, non-obligatory 60-minute initial strategic session. Let's get a feel for your dreams, your vision, your challenges, and let me convert that into a route map for you where we can co-develop and co-pilot. Number two, enroll in an innovative and intuitive digital online course that I have created to help you transform. It's called Unshakable Resilience. It is the ultimate program for individuals and business leaders like you who want to be equipped at a personal and professional level to respond to any form of challenges or in crisis situations and take on opportunities with grit, resilience, and build a mindset of success. In essence, you want to be unshakable, thrive in crisis, take on opportunities in the face of adversity, and build a success mindset. So, click the link below to learn more on how I can personally help you individually and your firm to scale and align your leadership team and business and pivot in a transformational way. And for you to experience this, whatever the challenge you're facing, get in touch with me. Let's discuss, and I will share my insight rapidly to enable your transformation. Click the links below.